Proposition 58, Ryan Anderson.
So Proposition 58 would change state policy with regard to educating English learners. These include the 1.4 million or so California students who first come from a household that speaks a language other than English as their primary language, and second, are considered by their school districts to not yet be proficient English speakers themselves. Under current state law, and this is due to a proposition called Proposition 227 that was passed in 1998, the state requires that most of these students be taught in an English-only environment. An alternative program, which was somewhat more popular before Proposition 227, is what's known as a bilingual program. And this is a program in which the student receives at least some of their instruction, say a math or a history class, in their primary language. Now, under the restrictions that were imposed by 227, school districts that want to operate a bilingual program have to go through a parental waiver process. First, they have to demonstrate that there's some reason that the student cannot succeed in an English-only environment, and then they have to have the parents of that student physically come to the school and sign a waiver saying that, yes, we know that there's an English-only alternative, but we're okay with our student attending the bilingual program. Proposition 58 would get rid of this requirement and would therefore make it much easier for school districts to choose to run a bilingual program. It would basically mean that there's no longer a state default for how these students need to be educated. As far as fiscal impacts, we don't see a significant impact either for the state or for local districts from this measure.
And I should mention that this is a referendum, meaning that the state legislature already approved this measure, but there were enough signatures to put it out to the people, and so we're
this is a good point.
Okay.
Just a clarification. So because Proposition 227 was a voter-approved initiative, the legislature cannot directly amend it. However, legislators put this on the ballot so that the voters would have an opportunity to overturn it. So technically, it's not a referendum, but it is a legislature-backed initiative.
Thank you. Support, the Democratic Party, Peace and Freedom Party. In opposition, we have the Republican Party and the Libertarian Party. In support, we have 57 nonprofit organizations, 6 unions, 16 school districts, San Diego State University, that's a first. And then in opposition, we have an organization called Keep English for the Children. In support, we have Governor Brown, Lieutenant Governor Newsom, others elected state officials, and mayors, Democratic officials for the most part. In opposition, Ron Unz, who was, the big person behind Prop 227, so that's no surprise. And a few newspapers have weighed in. The LA Times and Press Democrat in favor, Bakersfield, California against. The spending, again, really lopsided, most of these measures are. A little over $1 million in favor, and it's teachers associations, unions, and an association for bilingual education, and no money being spent against at this point. Questions on Prop 58?
So could these people literally be taught in their own language all the way up to 12th grade and never learn English?
No, this is actually a matter that's been decided by the United States Supreme Court. They've stated that all English learners are entitled to be taught to speak in English. The intent of a bilingual program is to eventually establish proficiency in English for the student. It just goes about that by starting primarily in their primary language and then slowly transitioning towards more and more English instruction.
It looks like this also allots money for immersion programs. Am I reading this correctly, where it allows English speakers to learn a foreign language?
So dual immersion programs are an interesting subset of bilingual programs where, say, in a Spanish dual immersion program, you might have a classroom where half of the students come from Spanish-speaking households and half come from English-speaking households. Now, under current law, the half of those students who come from Spanish-speaking households would need to obtain parental waivers to attend that program, but the half that come from English-speaking households would not. So if this law was passed, it would simply mean that none of the students would need to obtain this waiver first.
And one more question?
Yes. Did I hear you correctly that you did not see where there was going to be a fiscal implication of this? When Prop 227 was passed, a lot of bilingual teachers were laid off. You would need to hire bilingual teachers to teach these programs. That doesn't factor into the cost?
It's a good point. Now, of course, if a school district were to start up a bilingual program, and we do think that it's more likely if you remove these restrictions that more districts will make that choice, they would face certain startup costs, which would include hiring a teacher and acquiring new materials. The finding that we are emphasizing is that school districts already routinely hire new teachers and acquire new materials, and we find that the cost difference between bilingual teachers and bilingual materials and their English-only counterparts is not significant.
Thank you.